Good afternoon, everyone. I am Erica Schindewolf, and on behalf of the NSGC Webinar Subcommittee, I want to thank you all for joining today's member webinar titled Professional Advancement, Advocating for Yourself Within Your Institution and Beyond. We encourage attendees to ask questions throughout the presentation. As a courtesy to our presenter, all attendees have been muted. Please utilize the Zoom panel to type any questions in the chat box. Questions will be read aloud at the end of the webinar. Today's learning objectives are to differentiate between degree, title, and role, explain how to utilize the appropriate title to advance your career, describe 3 activities you can utilize to increase your skill set and knowledge base to translate into growth in your professional career, and to outline the elements of a compelling business case that will enhance your ability to gain personal resources and professional growth. Today, we have the pleasure to hear from Stephen Kiles. Stephen is currently the Senior Director of Genomic Services at Quest Diagnostics, where he oversees and manages all activities of the genetic counselors for Quest Diagnostics. In his role, he acts as the liaison between genomic services and other areas of the company, such as advanced diagnostics, corporate medical, research and development, laboratory services, finance, legal, compliance, and commercial. He earned a master's degree in genetic counseling from Sarah Lawrence College and a bachelor's degree in psychology from Binghamton University in New York. Prior to joining Quest, Stephen was with Ambry Genetics, which he joined in 2000 during the company's startup phase. His positions included Director of Genetic Specialists, Director of Clinical Affairs, and Vice President of Clinical Diagnostics. Stephen also has more than 20 years experience in the clinic in pediatric, adult, and prenatal genetic counseling, and was recognized as a leader in the molecular diagnostics and phenotype associations for cystic fibrosis, and was a pioneer in helping bring hereditary cancer panels into the mainstream. He started his career working as a clinical genetic counselor at Kaiser Permanente in Los Angeles, California, where he was the primary genetic counselor for 17 years. Stephen has also been active in the National Society of Genetic Counselors, chairing several committees and task forces, and serving on its board of directors multiple times, as well as having served as the president in 2009. We are very lucky today to hear from him, and I am now happily handing off the presentation to Stephen.
Thank you very much. Figured I'd take myself off mute. That would probably be helpful. So welcome everybody. I'm happy to be here, and I am really going to focus on 3 different areas. One is kind of looking at ourselves as individuals and how that impacts the whole field and some of the benefits that we can take from that. A little bit on negotiation and strategies, and then we'll talk about making a business case and what that means in the context of what we do. And then at the end, I do have some examples that I want to share as well, so that you can see that this stuff actually works. So one of the things, obviously everybody here, this is an NSGC webinar and everyone's here is NSGC members, but I really want to emphasize the benefits of being involved in NSGC and how it's not just a personal opportunity, but it's really a professional opportunity as well. And when we look at basically having a voice, learning about issues that affect your profession, having an impact on developing policy, local, state. So many of you have been involved in licensure and can have an effect on state level laws with involvement. And so that is really crucial. There's really opportunities to enhance your skill set. This is really a great breeding ground for leadership development. And there are so many opportunities in terms of task force participation, leadership, chairing a task force, a committee, serving on the board in different roles. And those skills can then translate into your day job. So it's not just a matter of helping the profession, but it's actually helping yourself. And what's interesting is if you look at studies that have been done, people who participate in their professional organization, this is not specific to genetic counselors, this is any professional organization. If you own a car wash and you belong to the National Car Wash Owners Association, those people who belong to their professional society and participate have higher wages and higher job satisfaction. And so those are two things that everybody wants. So I would encourage all of you, when that colleague or that friend who is not an NSGC member, and here's an opportunity to really provide some information to them that can help them going forward. So this there's an old quote I highlighted in red. What's good for General Motors is good for the country, and that's actually the quote that most people know about. Many of you have probably heard it if you're old enough to remember General Motors. But it was actually the CEO at the time was going through confirmation hearings, Senate confirmation hearings for Secretary of Defense, and he was asked, can you make a decision that would be beneficial to the country that might not be beneficial to General Motors? And he said, of course I can. But his actual quote was, I thought what was good for our country was good for GM and vice versa. And so the idea here is that what is good for one genetic counselor is good for all genetic counselors. And that whether it's you helping somebody else or you helping yourself, that all of those pieces benefit every one of us. And that is really crucial. So, sometimes there's a competitiveness, in terms of, some graduates coming out, competing for jobs, the idea of hiring people and where their salaries are and how you rank within them. But the reality is that we are all contributing to the greater good, and that ultimately this is not an individual, like any one piece is not going to be as powerful as all of us together. So we are all working for the good of everybody, which ultimately comes back to you. So we have to really focus on that and spread that message that this is a team effort, and we're all going to benefit from everybody's success. So I want to talk a little bit about this. So job title, degree, what is this? So an MS in genetic counseling, that's my degree. Senior Director, Genomic Services, Advanced Diagnostics, that is my title. This is what I do, which was read earlier. When you are trying to advance your career, you're trying to be identified as the leader within the company, you want to take on other opportunities, you need to be really aware of what we're calling ourselves and how we promote our experience. So why is differentiation so important? Well, we are all genetic counselors. So if you go back to that previous slide and your degree and your job title and what you do all says genetic counselor, there's no differentiation there. So that is not really going to help you in the long run. We are looking to create opportunities. And your degree is not what gets you jobs down the road. It's going to be your experience and what skill set you have. So oftentimes you can highlight that by a job title. So if you have a job title that people can recognize or that is broad enough that it could include things, then it leads to the next step of, well, this is what I do. This is not just true within your organization, but also outside your organization. So if you were looking to move to another organization and you're only focused on jobs that are listed as genetic counselor, then you're only going to get jobs that have traditionally been held by genetic counselors. And so by creating more of these opportunities, it gives you a greater opportunity. You can make a better argument for compensation because you're not comparing yourself to positions that are within the current genetic counselor structure. So in some systems, in some companies, in some health systems, those might not be as high as other positions. So by focusing on what you do and not the title and not the degree, you can make a comparison. You can use this for negotiation for higher salary. You can make an argument for being qualified for a particular position. And we'll talk more about the negotiation part in a little bit later. But when you are looking, again, you don't want to use your degree. If you have a great title, great. If it doesn't benefit you, you don't want to focus on that. What you want to focus on is the skill set and what you do. And it doesn't have to be a genetic counselor job. The beauty and the great thing about so many genetic counselors is the skills we have acquired and the skill set that we possess qualifies us for a lot of things that are not necessarily advertised as a genetic counselor position. So, I mean, here's a list of a bunch of different jobs. Some of these, they're going to be specific for looking for a genetic counselor. They'll be advertising for a genetic counselor, but in many cases, they won't be. And so, product managers, account managers, clinical affairs director, MSLs. I mean, there are MSLs in pharma and in biotech that typically do not target genetic counselors, but there's no reason genetic counselors couldn't fill that position. So the important point here is focus on the skill set and not on the title and the job, the degree. So how do you go about getting and acquiring these skill sets? Becoming engaged at work, seeking out opportunities, looking for ways to enhance your learning, asking questions. So just because it's not in your purview or it's not assigned to you, but there's some side discussion project going on, you could learn a lot by getting involved. And so there's just volunteering to sit in on meetings or asking questions of people in different areas, whether you have more of a financial interest, asking questions about the budget or about how the financial decisions are made. This is really can be a great opportunity to not only help them see that you have an interest, but it's on-the-job training that is outside your specific area. And a couple of things. So networking is, to me, one of the most important things you can do, and you should be doing it all the time. Learning the company hierarchy. Everybody should know who's in charge, from the CEO or the head of the hospital or wherever you're working, all the way down to you. And you should be able to know all the people in between. And my guess is, depending on where you are, that it's not like there's that many people in between. Most companies don't have 15 levels, right? Most companies have, 7 maybe. So more than likely, there's not a huge amount. But understanding who in the company is making what decisions, getting to meet them so they know who you are, asking them questions, providing them input, understanding what's going on within your workplace, whether it's public, private. There's always going to be some type of corporate communications, newsletters, could be things in the news. That really helps demonstrate understanding of how the company works, how the health system works, how the state government works, depending on whatever role you're in. So this can apply, across the board. And you don't have to wait to be asked. You can, once you understand, the company's needs, you can really help in participating. Strategy is important. You have to have, what's your own strategy? What is your goal? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do? Are you looking to advance higher up in the organization? Are you looking to grow the group that you are in? Are you looking to advance beyond? Are you looking to take on additional responsibilities? You have to do the homework, and that effort can be rewarded many times over. So it doesn't have to be something that is specifically work sponsored. Many companies offer professional development, online courses. So there's often many things you can do within your own workplace. Many companies offer tuition reimbursement. So there's an opportunity for, if you wanted to take additional classes that would be very specific to what area of interest you have. Don't be afraid to share your thoughts. So if you have an idea, you have thoughts, you share those thoughts. And that's why understanding the hierarchy, who does this apply to? Who would be an important person to share this with? So sharing your insights and your ideas will help identify you as somebody that is, they're thought of as strategic, as looking to weigh in with their ideas, and somebody who, if you're in an organization, these are the kind of people you want to surround yourself with. So you never know when some opportunity might come open, and they might reach out to you, or in some scenarios, given somebody's skill set, expertise, and situation, they could potentially create a position that is specific to what you do and what you want to do. So making sure your manager, your supervisor, the people up the chain have an understanding of what is your strategy, what is your goal, and how does your goal fit in with the company goals, with the organizational goals. And if they are aligned, that's something that will that they can certainly work towards to try to see if that can happen. So when we graduate, we have a skill set, and depending on when you graduated, that skill set varies. But as we go along, we're going to acquire skills along the way, and most of the skill set we have is not from school. It's from what we acquired along the way. And I think strategic thinking is a key piece to really set people apart. And it doesn't matter what organization you're in, everybody is thinking strategically. And so becoming an expert in something can really help set you apart from the pack in terms of having this specific area of expertise. The other piece is just because it isn't your area of expertise doesn't mean you can't do it. Just because you don't have training that provided you with that expertise doesn't mean you can't acquire it from experience along the way. If I think about a good example, coming out of school, doing mostly prenatal counseling, you counseling patients who are going to have an amnio. This is back in the day when we did amnios. And there was all these questions about people that what it was going to feel like, or is it going to hurt, or I have this, I have these questions around pain or effects, and wondering if it's normal. And I just remember that I would be in conversations with an OBGYN and the patient would ask the question, the OB would answer it, and I would hear patient after patient ask the same question. And I would hear different OBs all answer the same question the same way. And after 4, 5, 6, 7 times, I felt like, okay, well, I know the question and I certainly know the answer. So I could answer those questions. I certainly was never an OB, didn't pretend to be, but I could certainly answer questions because of the knowledge related to that I acquired along the way. So that can be expanded to anything. It can be certainly outside of our area. We're not looking to practice medicine, but certainly answering basic questions or developing expertise in a particular disease and becoming more of a clinical expert, as well as maybe on the molecular side, gives you an opportunity to really set yourself apart. And again, I think, networking cannot be stressed enough, because oftentimes the jobs, the opportunities, it's because of conversations you've had, people who know you, people who have worked with you. That is why maintaining these connections is really crucial. Volunteering for projects, just getting as much experience as possible is really going to benefit you. So once you gather all this, the key part is you need to sell it. Everybody has strengths. And how do you set yourself apart from others? So what you want to do is you want to highlight what is best for you and how you present yourself, taking advantage. So if you're selling a house or a car, you're always going to talk about the good things. Hey, the kitchen was just remodeled and there's the new backyard. You're not going to say the bathrooms are old and the garage needs painting. You're going to focus on what's good. So there is often a tendency not to sell ourselves because it sounds like we're bragging, or it's just not the personality of a genetic counselor. But in the business world, you have to sell yourself because nobody else is going to sell you. And you have to think about what it is that you possess. Why would somebody want to hire you? Why are you right for that? You can take everything and turn it into a positive for you. And when I say we're in the business world, if you have a job and you're getting paid, you're in a business. So this is not, whether it's for-profit, non-profit, state, everything's a business, because if it doesn't make enough money to pay the bills, it will go out of business. And so that's what I'm referring to when I talk about, like, this applies across the board. So a good example is, somebody who's been doing this for 20, 25, 30 years, a lot of experience, they can really speak to a lot of experience. What about a recent graduate? Well, you can turn that into a positive. Well, I've just recently graduated, so I have a lot of a lot of my training really focused on the latest technology, the latest literature, and I'm really up on all of the latest findings in this area. So, turning something that you would think is would you rather have over 20 years or would you rather be a recent graduate? Well, there's pluses and minuses for each one. So focus on the pluses, and that's what you want to push. So let's talk about negotiation for a little bit. And there is a language around it, and it is a process. And the key thing is it actually doesn't start until someone says no. And it sounds a little weird, but studies have shown that when bargaining with somebody, that the partner will be happier if you've made several concessions, and that you'll be happier if they've made several concessions. So basically, if they get what they think they want, then that's usually not good. So let me make an example. You put your house up for sale, you ask for $400,000, and the first hour that is on the market, somebody comes in and says, I'll take it. Here's $400,000. You go in and they ask for a salary, and you say, I want $80,000. And they say, okay, what's your first thought? Your first thought is, I didn't ask enough for the house, I didn't ask enough. If somebody offers you a job and they say it's $80,000 and you say, I'll take it, they're thinking, I offered too much. If that house was, if the salary was offered at 85 and or 75, and then you're like, well, I was hoping for 85, and then you settle on 80. Now it's the same 80, yet each side gave a little bit. Each side's going to be happier. Each side's going to feel like they accomplished something. And so that's kind of how it works. And the idea that I think we often think when you're on one end of the discussion, the other side has all the power. Doesn't really matter. It can go both ways. But when you're applying for a job, when you're asking for something more, the expectation is they have all the power, and that's not true. There's power on both sides, and so you need to follow through on that. And when you're providing a reason, so if somebody's going to say, why should I do that, or why are you worth more, you got to have a reason. Any reason is better than no reason. You always want to have some kind of comeback as to why you deserve the position, why you deserve more, why the house is worth more. All these things are factor in. You do need to understand the financials. You need to know what's a reasonable. If every house in the neighborhood's going for $400,000, putting yours on the market for $600,000, unless there's gold-plated toilets, it's probably not even reasonable. Could you go $450, $495? Depending on how much it's fixed up, it has to be in the ballpark. So you have to understand what's the financials of the company, what's the financials of the economy, your area, and then you need to develop a plan so that when you go in, you have an understanding. You never want to be wishy-washy. You never want to be not clear on what you're asking for or what your expectations are. If you're wishy-washy, you're going to get a wishy-washy answer. So you want a plan, and you want to be comfortable with what your plan is, and you want to stick to it. So negotiation. So this is not a four-letter word. It is actually expected. It is a process. And so when any of you that have ever hired somebody know that when you make your first offer, that is not your best offer. And if there's one thing, and I've given this negotiation lecture, I don't know, 50, 100 times. The one thing I say is never accept the first offer. If that's the one thing you remember and follow through on, then everyone will be better off. But you never accept the first offer. And so if you were going to sell something, you're not going to put the number on there that, I have a bike, I'm going to sell it. I'm hoping to get $100. It's probably worth $150 to $200. I'll put $150 on there and I'll accept $100. So, you know, that's the mindset. So you always want to put yourself on the other side. And that's important. So this is probably the best thing you can do, because when you think about that base salary, that first offer you get, that's going to determine largely where you're at, right? Because as over the years, we tend to, you know, you get your 2%, your 3%. Some years there might not even be a raise. So over a period of 4, 5, 6 years of only getting 1%, 2%, 3%, it kind of stagnates the salary. And so if you were to get a significant bump on when you first go in, then that will set you up. And then those 2 and 3% are now you know, they're compounded on top of a bigger number. And ultimately, you have to ask. And, you know, I love this quote from Wayne Gretzky: you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I guarantee if you don't ask, you won't get. I mean, that's a guarantee. And so when you go into this, the expectation is that there's going to be a process. And oftentimes there's hesitation. It's not easy. I understand, you know, dealing with employers or with negotiating can be difficult. But if you keep telling yourself they're expecting this, then that becomes more normal. And then you also have to think, well, what can you lose? What do you have to lose? You're going to lose your job. If you already have a job and you're asking for more, the alternative is are you going to lose your job? Are you going to lose your salary? Are they going to cut your salary because you're asking for too much? Benefits, they're going to take away benefits. Is your value to the organization going to be decreased because you are fighting for yourself? If you're fighting for a colleague, and you know, is there a possibility that they will take the job away from somebody else, or that it can affect a colleague negatively? Can any of these things happen? What can you lose? You can lose nothing, basically. You might not get everything you're asking for, and oftentimes you won't. But even if you get some of what you asked for, or most of what you asked for, you're in a better position. But the worst case scenario is that you don't get anything you're asking for. Not that you're going backwards, losing a job, losing salary, that kind of thing. So when you are asking for a raise, it's really important to understand in what context. So you need to know, how does the company operate, right? What's their budgeting? What's their cycle? You know, are raises the beginning of the year? Are they on your anniversary? Do they give off-cycle raises if they feel like, you know, because oftentimes the salaries are, you know, that 2%, 3%, or whatever your merit salary raise might be at a particular time of year. And then if somebody is, let's say you feel your salary is out of whack, because over the years, salaries around went up and yours kind of stagnated, and now you're below market in your area. And there's an opportunity in many cases to do an off-cycle raise in it. And so you want to focus that on, you know, how does the company deal with that? How does the organization work, and understanding. And the timing, you know, today might not be a good day for a raise. If your company just let go of 3 people and cut the budget, I don't think going in there tomorrow asking for more money is probably the best scenario. But so being aware of the politics of what's happening within your company, you want to gather up all the data you can. You want to highlight all your positives. You want to talk about all the things that you bring, and bringing that to the conversation. And so, what are some of the options you can utilize? Because sometimes the answer is not atypical to be, well, you're already at the top of the level of your grade, and so there's nothing I can do. My hands are tied. So what you need to do there is you need to look for a better job classification. And in some cases, you need to rewrite your job description. So if you think about, if you've been somewhere for a while, maybe what you do now is so much more than what is in your job description. And then you can potentially get that regraded to a higher level. So that's really a great way. You want to look at what are the job descriptions, what are similar roles. I just put a couple. Clinical nurse specialist is one that I've highlighted for a long time because they have similar education, they have similar roles, and generally the salaries were significantly higher. So you can look at, MSLs is another one. Look within your organization, there will be other roles that people have, and see what, are they graded higher? And then, so this would be something you would need support on throughout the organization. You would need HR involvement, compensation involvement, but again, it's doing your homework, it's gathering up all this information, and it's highlighting the areas where, if you're involved in administrative and strategic functions, then those often are reimbursed at a higher rate, and those positions are often higher, so you can try to create some combination. So this would really be a good option from working within to try to move the group or yourself into a different level. And so when you do all this, what you really are doing is developing a business case. And whatever the need or the interest is, we want to develop a business case. And there are several things to really focus in on for a business case. And just kind of quick through this, you need to figure out, do an analysis of the scenario. What am I trying to accomplish? What is the goal here? What are the benefits? What is the most likely scenario? What is the best case, worst case? So you're kind of putting things together, and I have some examples that I'll go through after this to kind of hopefully clarify it. You want to link the benefits, cause and effect. If I do this, it'll increase productivity. We can decrease costs. I can take on a larger patient load. So there's very specifics around that. What are going to be the key performance indicators? What's your metric that you're going to measure to show success? And so key executives, leadership can look and say, this is if we implement this, we're able to show progress, we're able to show benefit. And so they have to know on the front end, what am I going to be measuring on the back end to show that this was worthwhile? And a couple more. One, this is an important point, the risk of not investing. So if we don't do this, what could happen? Could we lose business? Could we lose customers? Could we lose patients? Could we lose market share? Could we lose employees? And all of these things are real risks that are valid. And so this, a great business case talks not only about the benefits and risks of moving forward, but also the risks of not investing. And oftentimes, you can say that the risk of not doing anything is the greatest. And so it sort of forces them to say, okay, we got to do something. What's the best solution? And obviously making sure that you are aligned with the company's strategic goals. So if your project aligns with the company and it's strategic, then that's going to be well received. And if a project where you get high return on investment, ROI is return on investment. But if it's something that really is not in alignment with the company's strategic plan or strategic goals, it's not going to have a high priority. So you do want to make sure you're focused in on what the company or organization's goals are. So to kind of put this into sort of standard, how does this normally work? So the old standard for genetic counselors, a genetic counselor is hired to see patients. Time goes on. We increase indications. More procedures are available, more testing. There's more patients. Testing volume increases. You basically say, I have all this, I used to see 100 patients. Now I see 300 patients. I need more physicians to handle the increase. So that's sort of that typical case. What you need is to develop a measurable plan, and you're going to need metrics. And this is something that we've been talking about I've been involved in for quite a while. And I would say for the longest time, we never really had good metrics in the genetic counseling profession. And all of a sudden, with more and more companies, more and more organizations, hospitals wanting to know, what am I getting for my dollars? I need something measurable. And so for many of you, there's been this recent, not very recent, but over the last several years, focus on metrics. How many patients are you seeing? How many calls are you taking? How many visits do you make? Whatever it is, there's something to measure. And it gets a little scary. It's like people think, oh, all of a sudden they want to know what I'm doing. It's like, and people get all freaked out. It's like, you want to know how many calls I'm taking or how many of this. And people think, oh, I know why, because you want to be able to see what I'm doing so you can cut. And that is so far from the truth. I mean, it's possible, but it's really the opposite. It's, if I'm going to need more resources, I need something to go to my boss to say, I need more help, and here's why. And I need metrics. And I can't go in and say, my team says they're overworked and they need more help. And based on what? I need something. So the more you can figure out what are good metrics to track and how they represent what you do, the better off. And it could, certainly financial is great, but they don't always have to be financial. It could be publications, it could be patient volumes. Depending on where you are and what you do, you have to figure out what's a reasonable metric and what's something that you can specifically track. So what's a relevant business case for you? You can figure that out. And some of the things we talk about, patient, test volumes, additional roles and responsibilities, team development, team retention. These are all important points that can be utilized to help get the resources that you need. So kind of walking through this, what do I want? What am I going to do with it? What's it going to cost me? And what's my return on investment? So for example, I want one more GC FTE, full-time equivalent. That's the terminology we use for a full-time position. So what do I want? I want to hire a full-time GC. What am I going to do with it? Well, I'm going to utilize that GC to see patients that we're currently not seeing, or to increase patient load. What's it going to cost me? There's a defined cost of hiring a genetic counselor. What is my return on this investment? So then you can map that out. I'm able to see more patients. We're able to have shorter wait times. We're able to increase our reputation in the community. We can also use this counselor to provide education to physicians in the hospital, in the community. We can increase referrals. So you kind of go through that. So a genetic assistant, same thing. I want a genetic assistant. What am I going to do? I'm going to give them tasks that are currently being done by the genetic counselors. What's the cost? It's going to be a lower cost. And my return on investment is it's going to make my team more efficient, and they're all going to be able to focus on the higher level things. Again, I want to regrade the current GCs. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to make a a regrading across the board to provide direct feedback to the team about their value and where they fit in the organization. What's it going to cost me? Well, if it's a 10%, if everybody's going to get 10,000 more and I got 10 counselors, it's $100,000. What's my return on this investment? I'm going to have greater employee satisfaction. I'm going to have increased productivity, and I'm going to have greater retention. So those are things. So not every plan is specific to showing that it's either cost savings or increased revenue. Here, the benefit is increased retention, which actually is a financial benefit, but it's a little different. So that's how we kind of go through that. And I want to touch on a few real life successes. So just to show that that this works, and I've heard back. I've been given this talk for 15 years probably, or some version of it. And I just was told a story about that after a talk in Portland in 04, I believe, at the regional meeting, one of the counselors was kind of inspired by the talk and hadn't asked for a raise in a long time, and went in and asked for a raise and kind of followed the steps, and ultimately got a 50% increase in salary. And she went in and asked for it and provided the backup and used the salary surveys and the information to justify it. And she was obviously a fan and realized the value there. And so she actually encouraged a friend to advocate for herself some years later. And this was somebody and one of the pieces that she utilized was that it's not just about you, it's about the whole profession. And that you advocating for yourself is actually advocating for the whole profession. And so she took that. She took what I had provided. Actually, it was interesting because she said that she actually had heard my talk when she was in grad school at a EBS workshop that I had given to students that had been taped. So she actually heard the talk, kind of put two and two together. They offered her a 2%, 3%, somewhere in whatever raise. She went in and advocated, put together her argument, and ended up with an almost 8% raise. So it actually works. This was a long time ago. I had a genetic counselor. This was probably, close to over 10 years ago, who was in Vermont, and they were hiring a new counselor, and there was not a lot of applicants. And in order to hire the new position, they were likely going to need to offer more than what her current salary was. And she called and we talked. She said, "Am I shooting myself in the foot by hiring a new counselor at more money than I'm making?" And I said, "Absolutely not. That is exactly what you want to do. If you're hiring a new counselor at more money and you're more experienced and you're the supervisor, this is not something that fits in the HR model." So again, the fear is, are they going to lower my salary? No. So they hired the new counselor. They hired her at a higher salary. The day after, HR came to her and said, "We have a problem. Her salary is higher than yours. We need to raise your salary." She got an $8,000 raise that week. And then another time, a genetic counselor was moving to California from Texas. She had multiple offers. And we were talking, and the one she really wanted was the lowest salary, but she really liked the job. And so she ended up she tried to get more, but they wouldn't budge. So she took it. And once she got there, she started working from within and worked with the current counselors. They worked to to get the salaries adjusted. And within a year, they had increased all the counselors' salaries, something like 20%. So because they were at the bottom of the scale. So I think it's really important to remember that these things just go on. So think about it. When all these when all these things happen, and now that we're doing the salary survey every year, all this new information goes in every year. And so all of these stories ended up helping every one of you when you used the salary survey or when you looked at local information. So I have my own personal success. When I first moved out to California, it was a little easier to be coordinated because there was not as many of us, but it was much more difficult because there was no email, there was no fax. We ended up doing a salary survey, and I'm trying to even remember, how did we get everybody the survey? I remember people had to fill it out and mail it back. But we used that survey to get our salaries significantly increased within Kaiser, and then we shared the information. So whoever was at the bottom of the barrel in the LA area, they could go to their organization and say, you know, we're the lowest salary in the area, and so one by one, people get bumped up, and it's like a game of leapfrog. And so it was successful because we worked together within our own groups. Now the surveys and things are much more defined. And I just want to highlight one other success that I had, which was in my current organization. When I got on board, I realized that I felt the counselors were not graded appropriately. I felt I was not graded appropriately. And so what I quickly realized was I needed to put a plan together and start working towards how do I go about doing this and how I approached it. And there were challenges along the way because I realized I wasn't able to do it all at once. I realized that there were certain times where there was a change in leadership, and you know the process started, and then it switched in leadership, and I had to restart it. But I kept gathering the data. I kept using updated data. I kept pushing through, and I utilized whatever I could to create an argument, how the effects of the annual budget, and ultimately success. It was probably a good, depending on how you want to count it, anywhere from 1 to 2 years. You could argue it took 3 years from when I wanted to do it, but really 1 year from when I had the right leadership that I should say once the leadership stopped changing. So clearly it can be done, but you have to be patient and you have to work towards it. And so I wish you all good luck, and I will open it up for questions. I see questions on here. So one question was the rigid structure for genetic counselors, so there's no negotiating. I think when you have that structure, you need to look at what is that based on. Oftentimes it's going to be based on what grade that's slotted in. And so I don't think you're alone. I think I'm in a rigid structure. There's a high and a low, and you know, I cannot go beyond a certain amount. So, and where you fall, if you fall in the high end, you kind of get little to no raises. If you fall in the middle or low, you have more opportunity. So what you really need to look at is how that, you know, where does that fall in the grade, and how are you able to change grade and make an argument for that. So another question, the salary survey is not valid because it's self-reported. I had the same issues. When I was doing this, they said, you know, we'd prefer a, not only a self-reported survey, but, you know, a paid, they wanted an anonymized, paid, independent. Those are really expensive. And I mean, I went through we certainly didn't have the money to do an independent study, and I pulled out the key points that I could, and I said, ultimately, this is the data that we have. You are certainly more than welcome to contact other people in the area, but hopefully you can find somebody in HR who will be your advocate. And I would focus on the employee retention. Do you have trouble hiring people? Have people left? So those are things that will get attention. And so would I recommend advocating for a salary adjustment and title adjustment at the same time? They can go together, or they can, obviously a title adjustment doesn't cost anything. So that what you might want to consider is when you're looking at the title, how is that graded, and could you get a grade change focused in on it? If not, I think the title is an easy thing, because your argument is, look, I want my title to represent what we do, and it also represents how we are perceived from outside the organization. So the title is the easiest thing, because it's a no-cost big win scenario. So I think having a better title is an easy thing. The other piece of this is what your title is inside your organization, GC1, GC2, that is irrelevant. That's your internal term, and it doesn't necessarily translate to the outside. So you might not even need support from the organization to change your title. If you're listed in the intranet and the systems and you want to have that title there, then you would need to do that. But clearly, I would say the title is definitely something you can work on, and if you can lump it in with the grade, that would be ideal. So another question said, this is good, I like this one. Valuable presentation, but there is a problem. You are a male presenter. So there I am, and there's nothing I can do about that. And one of the things, there's clearly an issue with a woman-dominated field, but I also think it is the more important thing is, I think it's more of a personality of genetic counselors, in that we don't want to rock the boat. We're just, nobody got into this so they could become a millionaire. Everybody's doing this. They love patients. They love contributing. And I think the idea of selling yourself, I always say this, I think, you take female genetic counselors and you take females who graduate from the Wharton School of Business and go into finance, and their negotiating skills are going to be a little different. And so I'm not saying that there might not be issues, but I think the bigger issue is you just have to have the confidence and the willingness to fight for yourself, because, and you might have to fight harder being a female. But the other thing is, since this is a female-dominated field, and so many of the genetic counselors report to other genetic counselors, that means most of them are reporting to females. So I think it's worth it. I'll acknowledge it, but I don't buy it as an excuse. I think we all have the ability. You all have the ability to fight for yourselves, and there are counselors in very high positions making a lot of money that are female. So it's not that it can't happen. Let's see.
Steve, we also had another question come in through the chat box, and it says, at our institution, genetic counselors are part of a union. Do you have any experience or recommendations in the context of a collective bargaining agreement?
So when I was at Kaiser, we fought not to be in the union, but I know that Northern California got in the union, and so I don't have personal experience with union, other than there are certainly benefits and drawbacks. The key part is usually you're lumped in with other groups, right? It's not a genetic counselor union that only has genetic counselors typically. So you really want to work with the union leadership, and you want to have a voice and make sure that your concerns and your issues are being addressed. And I wish I had more, to offer in that context, but I really, unfortunately, don't.
Thanks, Stephen. Unfortunately, at this time, we're going to have to cut this webinar short. On behalf of the NSGC webinar subcommittee, we wanted to thank you all for attending, and a huge thanks to Stephen for sharing his expertise. As a reminder, this recording will be available within 48 hours on NSGC's website, along with the Q&A document for any questions we were unable to answer during today's webinar. Thank you all very much and have a wonderful day.